Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates. My name is Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy Ren. How are you going?
I'm very good, Bryce. Great to be back for another Watchlist Wednesday.
Yep.
We always say every week we love to sit back, relax, and hear an expert tell us 3 stocks on their watchlist. Especially this week, though, because you haven't been able to stand up all week.
Yes. It hasn't changed. We are going to sit back and relax and hear another expert on our Watchlist Wednesday. This expert was on our podcast, Equity Mates Investing Podcast, last week for a deep dive on his strategy. So make sure you go and listen to that. But it is our pleasure to welcome Lawrence Lamb from Luminary Investment Management. Lawrence, welcome.
Thanks for having me again, guys.
So as I said, Lawrence, you did join us last week to talk about your founder-led investment strategy, looking at businesses that have founders with skin in the game and are certainly leading the company into the future. Really fascinating episode. So do go and listen to that if you're just joining us for the first time. But Lawrence, you're going to be talking about 3 companies today on your watch list. So we may as well get stuck into it. The first is Kakao. The ticker is 035720, if I'm not wrong. But what's the company and why is it on your watch list?
Well, just before I jump in, guys, a bit of context. It's incredibly important for active investors to establish their edge. If you don't have an edge, you shouldn't be active and you should just invest through a fund manager or an ETF. So for me, there are several ways I look to establish that edge. First is I exclusively focus on founder-led companies around the world. Second, I cast a wide net. So I start my search far and wide in geographies and industries that a lot of other people won't look at. Third is I look to avoid the overhyped companies. And because I'm an independent investor, I run my own fund, I have the ability to look beyond just the next quarter and really look longer term. That allows me to ignore the noise and concentrate on what's actually happening on the horizon. So that's the context. Now, the first stock, Kakao, is an example of casting a wide net. You read the ticker out. It's a Korean company, and in Asia, they don't have the alphabet as their ticker. It's usually some number. Kakao is a South Korean company. If I could summarize it succinctly, it is the WhatsApp, the Spotify, the Uber, the Warner Music of Korea, and it's fast expanding into US and China. Founded in 2006, Kim Byung-soo is president and CEO. He still owns 24% of the company. Now, he started Kakao after he gained experience in Silicon Valley, and when he moved back to Korea, he wanted to create the first messaging app in Korea. And that's how it all started. And that's why now they dominate 90% of the chat market in South Korea. I'm invested in Kakao through Luminary Investment Management, and the company itself has met our stringent investment framework. And because we're highly concentrated, we don't invest in anything that doesn't meet that framework. This includes things like, is it founder-led and the quality of the founder? Yes. Opportunity to compound over a very long period of time, over a very long runway? Yes. Market position, very dominant in the chat space and expanding into other adjacencies, which I'll talk about. Competitive edge. And there's a bunch of other things that I look at that are on our framework, but I don't have time to cover today. If I look at Kakao and I look at what the opportunity is going forward, beyond chat and the advertising business they have now, it's in 2 very exciting lines. The first one is financial. So they've created a platform that allows them to offer financial products and thereby taking a skim of every single investment that's made on their platform, deposit, bank account that's opened, etc. The second part is content through games, music, stories, and IP. So these businesses combined are growing at an average of 20 to 30% per annum. With the content side of things, a lot of people talk about Netflix, Spotify, the digitization of media. But what I'm more interested in is the next battlefield, which is in content, because all these platforms that have shows, TV shows and podcasts and the like, they're all looking for new ideas and new content. And we see that in Squid Game, which is a Korean-based show, and what Kakao is doing in that content space is owning all that IP. With any investments, you have to consider the risks. And with Kakao at the moment, there's a strong regulatory risk that's overhanging the company at the moment. But that's one way to look at it. But the other way to look at it is if you take a longer term horizon and you look at Kakao over the next 10, 20, 30 years, and you consider the market dominance it has in the chat space, which is going nowhere, and they're going to be there for a long time, and their ability to expand into China and the US, that's one side of the equation that many stringent, dogmatic value investors would overlook.
Nice.
I think a lot of fund managers overlook certain geographies and become fixated on the US. There's a lot of opportunity outside of the US, and Kakao is an example of that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating company, Lawrence. One that you spoke about on the podcast as well, I believe. So if people want to hear more about that company, they should go and check out our podcast episode with you. Let's move to the second company, and that's Adyen, A-D-Y-E-N, for those playing along at home. Can you tell us a little bit about the company and why it's on your watch list?
I mentioned before about avoiding the overhyped companies, and Adyen fits into that mold, where a lot of the names we hear about here in Australia are big US tech companies doing sexy things, Australian tech firms that you hear about, but oftentimes what I'm looking for are the underrated guys, the guys that are under the radar, and a lot of these European first movers are exactly that. I'm seeing a lot of opportunity in countries in the Scandinavia region, in Netherlands and in Germany, and they're not companies that you hear about often, and it's a different style of founder where they're not just in front of the mic the whole day, chest puffing. These European guys are a little bit more reserved, a bit more under the radar and dynamic and dynastic in how they think about business. So this is Adyen, a Dutch-based company involved in the payment space. They're founded in 2006 by Peter van der Does, who is a co-founder and still today president and CEO. He remains a significant shareholder in the business. Now, with the payment space, a lot of times people think about Visa, MasterCard, and the newer players like PayPal, but that's not where Adyen is competing. They're competing on a aggregation level. So you think about all these payment platforms that people are using these days. Now, in Australia, we use Visa, MasterCard, we use Apple Pay, some will use Samsung Pay. But you think about globally, Brazil, they're using Boleto. Russia, they use Kiwi. China, they use Alipay and WeChat Pay. So if you're a retailer looking to sell to a global audience, you have to establish payment channels with each and every one of these platforms. And that can become very cumbersome. So what Adyen offer is a all-in-one platform that already has a global payment integration, has the multi-jurisdictional compliance regulation sorted, and all a retailer needs to do is plug directly into Adyen. Now, in return, of course, Adyen, they're going to take a clip of every single transaction that's going through their platform.
Well, I think that it's always great hearing about companies from other markets other than the States and Australia. So certainly going to add that one to the watch list. And staying with the European theme, the third stock on your watch list, Lawrence, is Hermes. The ticker is RMS over in France, I think, from if I got my notes right. But are you able to tell us what the company does and why it's on your watch list?
Yeah, very simply, it's the luxury, the number one luxury player in the world, number one luxury brand in the world. I spoke about it on the podcast a week ago with you guys. I think it was Ren. You remarked that it listed in 1993. It was €6 at the time. Today, it's 1,200 euro. And if you include, so that's a 200 bagger right there. But if you include all the dividends you've collected along the way, I think it's closer to a 300 to 400 bagger. Hermes, incredible company. You would know it from its handbags, from the leather products, the belts. It fits the luminary investment framework to a T. It's founder-led. From a quantitative perspective, generating return on capital 20 to 30% per annum consistently. You look at defensively how it's held up through the pandemic, dropping only 7% in revenues, but up until then was really every year consistently producing revenue growth. You look at its competitive edge, and that's not even the full framework that we go through. The attributes that I'm looking that result from that analysis is it's a 200-year-old company that has grown effectively from 1.7 billion euro in revenue in 2008 to 6.3 billion euro in revenue last year, and that's a 3.5 times growth in revenue for a 200-year-old company. It's like a grandma that's going through puberty again. If you look at its reputation, you remarked last week that they're selling secondhand handbags for anywhere from $20,000 to $100,000. Now, how does a brand achieve that level of market dominance in prestige? Well, first, they are fully vertically integrated. So right from factory, sourcing of materials, everything is in-housed, and Hermes does not outsource anything. That allows them to be very flexible in how they operate their supply chain. It allows them to be very flexible in how they distribute their product and maintain that brand prestige. So if you look at what I focus on a lot on is the founder's mentality, and now they're up to their 6th generation of ownership, really dominated by 3 families, all descendants of Thierry Hermes. And in fact, the current CEO is a descendant. In 2014, interestingly, they fended off a hostile acquisition by LVMH, Bernard Arnault, who is the owner of LVMH. And if I summarize Axel Dumas, who's the current CEO and descendant, he said, Hermes and LVMH have a different set of values and a different culture. That's why he's not agreeing to the hostile takeover, despite a lot of investment analysts saying that it would be a good move for Hermes. Now, he went on to say that you don't court a lady by smiling to her face, only to attack them from behind. And I think that quote and this mentality sums up what is different about Hermes and how they exemplify that true founder's culture. Now, of course, with any investment, things that investors need to be mindful of and keep monitoring, the entry price in which you enter into Hermes, the rise of the wealthy in China, the Middle East, Southeast Asia continues to drive forward, but you need to monitor how that changes over time. And of course, a brand like this, you need to ensure that their ability to maintain that reputation, their number one reputation, is maintained over the long term. But that's Hermes. And in terms of founder spirit and longevity, it's unrivaled.
Yeah, it is pretty phenomenal that a country that's 200 years old can continue to grow with such vigor. I don't think I would have ever expected to hear it referred to as a grandma that has just gone through puberty again, but I thought that was classic. But it's you talk about the power of brand, and this company can pump, sell handbags for hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's pretty phenomenal. So yeah, definitely one to watch, and some good advice there on thinking about some of the key things to consider when getting into these sorts of companies that do have such strong moats, but demographic sort of driving their growth as well. So Lawrence, we have run out of time, unfortunately, but it's such a fascinating strategy that you have adopted, and as I said, we recommend anyone who is currently watching to go and listen to our episode with you, because we go into a bit of depth around your strategies. So thank you very much. We appreciate your time and looking forward to catching up again at some point soon.
Pleasure, guys.
And that brings us to the end of another Watchlist Wednesday. A reminder, we had Kakao over in Korea, Adyen over in Amsterdam, and Hermes over in France. So 3 stocks from around the world, which we love to see, Ren. And we'll be back tomorrow.
We'll be back tomorrow. We are joined by another fund manager, Gary Rollo, who's a specialist in small caps. Will be taking us down to the small end of the market and telling us what's going on.